"The stinky country woman is here," Brielle muttered under her breath. "Careful to let only a few bridesmaids hear." That was the first thing I heard when I stepped into my son's engagement party. The words cut hard enough to stop me mid-step, as if the whole ballroom had turned to ice beneath my boots. Conversations paused briefly. People exchanged glances, pretending not to hear. In that subtle way people do when they want to pretend they did not hear cruelty spoken out loud. But I heard, and I knew she wanted me to. For a moment, I could not lift my head. My throat tightened, and my chest felt like it was folding inward, the way it sometimes did in the worst storms back home. I had come here hoping to make a good impression, hoping my son's fiancée would welcome me into this new chapter of his life. Instead, she looked at me as though I had tracked in mud. "My name is Nola Merritt. I am 65. I had scrubbed my hands raw before leaving the ranch, trying to wash away the scent of cedar and hay, but Brielle's voice carried across the polished room like a blade sharp. Deliberate, meant to draw blood, and it did. I turned toward the exit, already planning my quiet escape. If I left now, no one would stop me. Maybe no one would even notice. But then a hand closed around my arm. "Mom," Grant whispered, his grip steady but trembling underneath. "Do not go. Tomorrow everything changes. Just trust me." His eyes held something I had never seen in him before, a mix of fear and determination that pushed breath back into my lungs. I stayed still, rooted by more than humiliation now, and as the noise of the room faded behind us, I felt the first shift of a truth I had not yet learned, but was already moving toward. After Grant's whisper settled into my chest like a stone, the noise of the ballroom blurred. I stood there, holding myself together by a thread, and my mind pulled me back to the only place that ever steadied me home. I wasn't born into comfort. My grandparents came to the hill country with nothing but stubborn hope, and the ranch grew out of their hands. Then my parents, then mine. When my husband, Eli, died 15 years ago, the land was the only thing that kept me breathing. I worked through grief the only way I knew how, mending fences, feeding cattle before sunrise, patching roofs with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Grant was 16 then. He didn't ask questions. He just picked up his father's gloves and worked beside me. He learned the weight of water buckets during drought years, learned how to coax life out of dry soil. On the hard days, he'd look at me and say, "Mom, Dad built this. We're not letting it fall apart," and we didn't. We held it together with sweat, silence, and love that didn't need to be spoken. But everything shifted when he moved to Austin. I told him I was proud, but the truth is, I felt the ranch grow quieter without him. I'd watch his old truck disappear down the driveway, feeling the ache of watching the ranch grow quieter without him. Standing in that ballroom, listening to strangers laugh over champagne, I felt a sharp fear slide under my ribs. The same land that raised my son might now be the reason people circled around him with smiles that didn't reach their eyes, and I wasn't ready to lose him to that. Grant brought Brielle to the ranch on a warm Sunday afternoon, months before the engagement party. I remember wiping my hands on my jeans as they walked up the porch steps. Brielle smiled wide, all teeth and poise, smelling like expensive perfume that didn't belong anywhere near cedar or dust. "Ms. Merritt, I've heard so much about you," she said, reaching for my hand with fingers that had never known a callus. "Just call me Nola." I answered, keeping my voice steady. She glanced past me, eyes sweeping across the fields. "How many acres did you say you have again?" Grant stepped in. "Bree, we'll talk about that later." "Oh, I'm just curious," she said lightly. "This area is becoming valuable." Her tone didn't match her smile. It carried something heavier, something calculating. Inside, she barely sat before asking more. "Where does your water come from?" Wells City Supply and the highway expansion, does it affect you? She turned to Grant. Your mom should think about long-term management of the property, strategic planning. You know, Grant frowned. Brielle, come on. We're here to visit. I'm just making conversation, she said, but her eyes never left mine. Later that evening, her parents arrived. Thomas Caldwell shook my hand like he was testing the firmness of a business deal. Prime land you've got, he said. Hill country's exploding. Developers would pay a fortune for property like this. I'm not selling, I replied. He smiled thinly. Everything has a price, he said, eyes scanning the land like a ledger. I felt a chill run through me. I felt the shift. Then the invisible weight of people who looked at my home and didn't see family or history. They saw numbers, opportunities, leverage. When they left, Brielle hugged me, sweet as sugar. We'll take good care of things one day, she whispered. Her arm, Chapter 4, the warning that broke their peace. I waited 2 days before saying anything. I kept replaying Brielle's questions, her father's thin smile, the way she measured every inch of my land with her eyes. When Grant finally stopped by the ranch after work, I poured him coffee and tried to keep my voice calm. Grant, I began. I need to ask you something about Brielle. He set his mug down. Mom, please don't start. I'm not attacking her, I said softly. But she asked about acreage, water rights, wills. She talked about taking care of the ranch long term. That's not normal for someone who barely knows us. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. She's just curious. She grew up around business people. They think about planning. There's planning, I said, and then there's looking at this place like it's a prize. I felt that from her father, too. Grant's shoulders tightened. You're reading into it. You've never liked city folks. That's not fair. He pushed back from the table. You've lived out here too long. You see threats where there aren't any. I felt the words like a slap. I saw concern in her eyes. Grant, not for you, but for what you'd inherit. He stood, jaw clenched. You just don't want anything to change here. You fear losing me to the outside world. That's not true, I whispered. He grabbed his keys, breathing hard. Brielle loves me. She's good to me. Stop looking for problems. He left without finishing his coffee. I watched his truck disappear down the dirt road, dust rising behind him, and something in my chest pulled tight. For the first time in years, there was space between us, real space. But when he reached the end of the driveway, he hesitated before turning, just for a second, like he wasn't as certain as he wanted me to believe. S felt warm, but her words felt cold. The moment Grant walked away to greet guests, I tried to make myself small at the edge of the ballroom. I didn't want to cause him embarrassment. I didn't want anyone staring at me the way Brielle had. I just wanted the night to pass quietly. But quiet wasn't something Brielle believed in. I heard her before I saw her. Please keep the countrywoman's smell away from the front tables, she told a server. Her voice low but sharp enough to slice straight through me. The VIP seating shouldn't have to deal with that. The server glanced at me with an apology in his eyes. She didn't bother hiding her meaning. Brielle laughed softly with her bridesmaids. Grant tries so hard to make her presentable, bless his heart. My chest tightened. My hands shook so badly, I had to clutch my clutch with both palms just to keep them steady. I felt my face burn again, the humiliation rolling through me in waves so strong I could barely breathe. I stepped back toward the exit. I wasn't running away, I just needed air. Space. Anything that didn't feel like knives thrown from across a ballroom. I made it 3 steps before Grant appeared out of nowhere and grabbed my wrist, not hard, but desperate. Mom, don't go. Grant, I whispered. I don't belong here. His eyes filled with something raw. Something that didn't match the celebration happening around us. Please. You can't leave. Not tonight. Your fiancée doesn't want me anywhere near her guests, I said, my voice trembling despite my best effort. She made that clear. He swallowed hard, voice dropping. I promise you, Brielle won't win. Not after what's coming. Grant. What does that mean? He shook his head, jaw tight. Tomorrow, everything changes. I'll show you why. For a moment, he looked like the boy who used to grip my hand when storms rolled across the ranch, scared, determined, holding on to something he couldn't say yet. He didn't let go until I nodded, and the second he released my wrist, I saw it, the fear hiding behind his certainty, the tension in his shoulders, the unspoken truth rising between us like a fault line waiting to break. He knew something. Something big, something dangerous, something that could shatter the entire engagement. Grant barely spoke on the drive to his apartment the next morning. His fingers tapped the steering wheel, restless, as if each mile tightened something inside him. When we reached his building, he led me upstairs without a word. Inside, a young woman sat at his kitchen table with a laptop and small audio equipment spread around her. She looked up nervously. Mom, Grant said softly. This is Emily Tran. She's helping me. Emily offered a tentative smile. Hi, Ms. Merritt. I nodded, unsure, my nerves already raw from the night before. Grant, what's going on? He pulled out a chair for me, then sat across from me with a heaviness I'd never seen in him. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. He began. I kept defending Brielle. I kept thinking you were being protective. But things started adding up. Adding up to what? My voice shook despite my effort. He opened his laptop. She wanted you to sign succession papers. I stared at him. Succession papers for what? For the ranch, he said. She told me it was just planning. But then I overheard her telling her father you were lasting too long and complicating their timeline. Emily shifted uncomfortably, but Grant continued before I could speak. And then the interstate expansion project came up. I heard Brielle and Thomas talking about how the land near Dripping Springs would triple in value. They already had plans mapped out. My stomach twisted. Plans for what Grant looked at Emily, then back at me, Mom. I started recording them. Emily cleared her throat. Texas is a one-party consent state. If Grant is part of the conversation, the recordings are legal. He pressed play. Brielle's voice filled the room, cold and unfiltered. In 2 years, we can persuade her to accept assisted living. Brielle whispered, confident Thomas agreed. Grant will sign whatever we tell him once she's out of the way. My breath caught. Another voice. Thomas. Confident. Calculating. That land is worth a fortune with the expansion. Once we control it, we reinvest and never look back. The room blurred. My hands went numb. Emily paused the audio, but the words kept echoing inside me. Grant reached for my arm. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it sooner. I covered my face, shaking. The girl he loved. The man she called father. Both planning to take everything we'd built and put me aside like I was nothing. Grant's voice cracked. I won't let them touch you or the ranch, but we have to be smart. I lowered my hands. The weight of the truth settling like iron in my chest. They were powerful, they were prepared, and they had no conscience. Grant drove us straight to an attorney's office that afternoon, a small firm near the university where Emily said the lawyers were honest and not easily intimidated. The attorney, Mr. Lopez, listened without interrupting as Grant explained everything. When the recordings played, he didn't blink. These are clear, he said quietly. Premeditated fraud, elder exploitation, conspiracy, and yes, fully legal. Texas allows one-party consent. My hands were clasped so tightly my knuckles hurt. What happens now? Mr. Lopez leaned forward. They'll try to silence you first. People like this always do. He was right. It didn't even take 24 hours. Thomas called Grant, pretending calm. I heard every word through the speaker. Grant, misunderstandings happen. Let's settle this like adults. I can offer your mother a settlement $600,000 if she relinquishes her claim to the ranch. No legal trouble for anyone. Grant's jaw clenched. You plan to put her in assisted living. Thomas exhaled sharply. That's exaggerated. Old people need care. Look, take the money. Walk away quietly. I'm not walking away from my home, I said, stepping closer. Not for $600,000. Not for any amount. His voice dropped. Then this gets ugly. The call ended. Grant closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at me. Mom, they'll twist everything if we confront them privately. The only way they can't escape is if everyone sees the truth at once. At the wedding, I finished. He nodded. 200 guests. Her whole circle. They won't be able to bury it. My stomach tightened, but I didn't flinch. Then we show them. Grant took my hand. Whatever comes after, we face it together. The decision settled like a storm, gathering strength, silent. Inevitable. Ready to break. I woke before sunrise. My stomach twisted so tight I could barely breathe. Grant didn't say much on the drive to the venue, but the silence between us felt heavy, stretched thin by everything we carried. When we arrived, staff were already rushing around, adjusting chairs and floral arrangements. None of them knew the truth that was about to split this day open. On the deck overlooking Lake Austin, a large screen stood behind the altar, framed by white roses. To everyone else, it looked like a sweet touch photos of the happy couple playing during the ceremony. Only Grant, Emily, and I knew it held something else. I stood near the back, gripping the railing. Grant, I whispered. I don't think I can do this. He turned, eyes steady despite the tremor in his hands. Mom, you're not alone. Just stay where you can see me. Brielle floated toward the altar in her silk gown, glowing with confidence so bright it was almost blinding. Thomas walked beside her, smug as ever, his hand resting on hers like they had already claimed everything. He caught my eye for a moment and smirked, a silent reminder of the offer he thought I'd be desperate enough to accept. I looked down, forcing my breath to steady. The officiant began. Guests leaned forward, smiling, unaware of the wreckage beneath the lace and champagne. Each word pushed my heart higher into my throat. Grant stood tall, but I saw the tightness in his jaw, the way his shoulders braced like a man preparing for impact. Grant Caldwell, the officiant said gently. Do you take this woman? Grant lifted a hand. The officiant blinked. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Grant turned, projecting his voice with a clarity I'd never heard from him before. Before I say anything, he said, everyone needs to hear this. Gasps scattered across the deck. Brielle's smile froze, cracking at the edges. Thomas stepped forward. Grant, what do you think you're doing? Grant didn't look at him. Emily, he called, calm but firm. At the back row, Emily tapped her laptop. The screen flickered once, twice, and the entire wedding held its breath. Then the audio began to push through the speakers, faint at first, but growing clearer with every heartbeat. Brielle's voice, her real voice, cold, sharp, unfiltered. I watched her face shift as her own words slid across the air, slicing through the silence like a blade. And in that instant, everything started to fall apart. Brielle's voice burst through the speakers, loud enough to echo against the glass walls overlooking the lake. Just 2 years. Once she's in assisted living, Grant will sign whatever we put in front of him. A scream rose from somewhere in the back. Guests jerked to their feet. Hands flying to mouths, phones lifted instantly as people started recording. The officiant froze mid-gesture, pale as the roses behind him. Brielle staggered. Turn it off. This is edited, Grant. Tell them. Grant didn't move. Another recording played. Sharper. That land will triple in value once the interstate hits. We take control, we sell, and we never look back. Thomas's voice? Smooth, Confident? Ugly? Gasps rippled again. A woman near the aisle whispered, "Is this real?" Someone else muttered, "My God." "That's fraud." Thomas lunged toward the screen. "Shut this down right now." Emily stepped forward from the back row. "It's locked remotely," she said, voice steady. "You can't touch it." "You little," Thomas started, but another voice cut him off. Thomas Caldwell, a tall man in a gray suit, walked down the aisle. He carried himself with the kind of authority that filled the room instantly. I recognized him from the attorney's office, Investigator Reed. He held up a badge. "You and your daughter are subjects of an active inquiry into elder exploitation and attempted property fraud. Based on these recordings, we're moving forward." Brielle dropped to her knees, sobbing. "Grant, please, they twisted it. I didn't mean." Grant stepped back from her. "You meant every word." Thomas tried to push past Reed, but two security officers blocked him. "Get your hands off me. This is a private event." Reed didn't even flinch. Not anymore. The last recording hit the speakers. Brielle mocking my smell, my clothes, my existence. The humiliation was sharp, but for the first time, the shame wasn't mine. Grant faced the guests, voice steady but trembling at the edges. "There won't be a wedding. Not today. Not ever." Silence settled, heavy as stone. I felt something inside me loosen for the first time in months, a slow exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding. My son stood between me and the people who wanted to destroy us, and he didn't waver. The damage was everywhere: broken trust, shattered masks, futures collapsing in real time, but the truth finally stood in the open. And in the middle of the wreckage, Grant reached for my hand. The weeks after the wedding moved fast. Investigators filed charges against Thomas and Brielle, and every update felt like a small piece of weight sliding off my chest. Grant started spending weekends at the ranch again, then whole weeks, until one afternoon he walked into the kitchen, dropped his keys on the table, and said, "I'm moving back for good." I didn't hide the way my breath caught. "You sure?" "Yeah," he said. "This place needs us, and I need it." He meant more than the land. We fell into a rhythm, his hands working new irrigation lines, my hands steady on the routines that never changed. Sometimes we argued. Sometimes we worked in silence. But the space between us closed the way cracked soil softens after rain. One evening, he found me standing on the ridge where the fields dipped into the valley. The wind carried the faint smell of cedar, the same scent Brielle mocked. Grant stepped beside me. "Mom," he murmured, "this land survived because of you." I shook my head slowly. "No, because of us." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, I felt whole again. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments. Like, share, or subscribe. Your support keeps these true stories alive.